Simon crossed the Maine border for the first time in 6 years. He was sent on a business trip to this harsh and snowy region by the management of the construction company he was working for. He was supposed to discuss the supply of valuable lumber with the representatives of the local woodworking factory. Simon forgot what it was like to drive on an icy road and was feeling extremely uncomfortable behind the wheel of his Ford. Since the man didn't want to stay there longer than he had to, he deliberately didn't slow down and drove without stopping for several miles. Some of his worst memories were associated with this place, and therefore he really didn't want to go down memory lane. But the familiar turns, ice on the road, and the tops of the fir trees covered with snow involuntarily took the man's mind to the past. Simon was born in a small town in northern Maine. It was that town that he was now heading to on business of the construction company. Back then, his parents lived in poverty and couldn't afford to get their son most of the things he wanted. The town was small, and there weren't many jobs there. The best option was to get a job with a logging company, and it was every man's ultimate dream. That was why Simon decided to try his luck in New York after graduating from university. But there was another reason why he chose to leave this native town. Any thought of it caused Simon a severe headache, which was very hard to alleviate. The fact was that 6 years ago, through the fault of his own stupidity and pride, he broke up with his beloved girlfriend, who had probably moved on a long time ago. Later, Simon grew to regret his decision greatly, having realized that he made a very stupid mistake. Ever since then, the man turned into a bona fide bachelor who believed that there was no place for true love in his life. The man shook his head, trying to drive away the sad memories, and lost sight of the road for a few seconds. As a result, Simon was too late to notice the turn, which was hidden behind huge snowdrifts on both sides of the road. The man tried to turn the steering wheel sharply to the right in order to avoid a collision with the metal barrier, but he failed. He was too late, and the maneuver caused his Ford to skid badly. Losing control on the icy road, Simon crashed into the traffic barrier. Despite the fact that the airbags worked, the man still hit his chest on the steering wheel. Even though Simon immediately lost consciousness, he came to his senses just a few minutes after the accident. The man got out of the car with great difficulty and looked around. It was starting to snow, and this part of the road always had extremely little traffic. Simon tried to find his phone in his pocket in order to call for help, or to at least call a tow truck. To the man's great disappointment, his phone got smashed during the accident and was now laying under the passenger seat. Yeah, well, that's some situation I got myself into, Simon thought, rubbing his bruised collarbone. Having realized that there was no way for him to call for help, the man decided to get to the nearest house on foot. Simon knew that there was supposed to be a small town up ahead where he could get some help. The man was only 40 miles away from his destination, but there was no point in thinking about it now. Now, Simon had to quickly get to the nearest house, and only then could he think about the purpose of his business trip. The man walked for about a quarter of a mile before getting picked up by the driver of a timber truck. "Would you like a ride, sir? It's not the best time you've chosen to take a walk." "Well, come on, don't stand in the wind. Get on inside," the driver exclaimed, opening the door. Simon didn't have to be asked twice, and wincing from the pain in his chest, he climbed into the cab of the truck. The logging truck driver turned out to be a nice man who promised to take him to the nearest hospital. On their way, the driver told Simon that the weather forecast said that there would be a snowstorm coming to Maine. Judging by the fact that the city administration drove the snowplows out onto the streets, the driver must have been right. Finally, the building of the hospital appeared ahead. Simon couldn't wait to get to the emergency room. "Well, good luck to you, sir. Take care of yourself, and don't get into any trouble again." The driver of the timber truck said goodbye and honked twice, as if to confirm his words. Simon waved at his savior and headed towards the entrance, staggering from the side. The on-call nurse at the emergency room quickly questioned Simon and gave him a painkiller to begin with. Then she applied ointment to the patient's collarbone and wrapped it in an elastic bandage. All this time, the woman's face seemed vaguely familiar to Simon, but he couldn't remember anything in particular. On top of that, the man had just realized that he had left his wallet back in the car, which was waiting for him on the road near the city. "Looks like I don't have any money on me. That's a rough way to start a business trip," Simon drawled sadly. At that moment, the nurse looked at the patient sympathetically and caught herself thinking that she wanted to help him. "If you want, I could offer you a small room to stay in. You could rest, pull yourself together, and then you'll figure out what you need to do next. But I should warn you that I have a small child, although I don't think he'll bother you. My name is Nancy, by the way. My shift will be over soon, and I could take you home with me," the woman suggested, mustering up her courage. "Oh, that would just be wonderful, miss. I'm so tired that I feel like I might fall asleep any minute. Trust me, as soon as I get to my credit cards, I will pay you back every single cent," Simon hurried to answer. But Nancy flatly refused to take any money, saying that she didn't take money for helping people. Nancy's shift was over soon. She helped Simon walk out of the hospital as the man was getting weaker by the second, and then they went home. Fortunately, Nancy's home was nearby, so they got there quickly. As soon as Simon stepped inside the house, he was ready to fall asleep right in the middle of the living room. Nancy understood everything without words and immediately took the guest to his room. Simon only had enough strength to take off his coat and collapse onto the bed. Falling asleep, the man heard the owner of the house talking to her little son, who was very glad to see her come home. Simon didn't know exactly how long he'd slept for. The man woke up from the fact that someone was discussing some issues loudly in the next room. "Do you even have an explanation for it? Why did you bring him home, Nancy? Are we taking in all kinds of homeless people now?" Someone's male voice kept on going. "Simon isn't homeless, Ethan. He was on his way to the nearby town on business and got into an accident. There's nothing wrong with him staying with us for a couple of days," Nancy objected. Hearing their discussion made Simon blush deeply and feel very uncomfortable. The man behind the wall cleared his throat loudly and continued the unpleasant conversation. "Not only are we raising your late cousin's son, but you're also making a homeless shelter out of our home? We have to hire a nanny to at least take care of the boy, and that isn't cheap." "But I work too, Ethan, and you may have forgotten, but this is my house, so I certainly have the right to allow someone to stay in it," Nancy replied through tears. Simon's heart was breaking for the woman. After all, while he was sleeping peacefully, the mistress of the house was desperately trying to defend the rights of her guest. Having gotten out of bed, Simon dressed up and went out of the room. Meanwhile, Nancy and Ethan had already moved into the living room, where they continued their argument. But Simon had no intention of making anyone uncomfortable, so he decided to be frank. "Please forgive me. I'm very grateful for your help, but I have to leave now. It will be better for everyone this way." Nancy simply sobbed in response and covered her eyes with their hands in embarrassment. "See what you've done? It's all your fault. Get out of here, you tramp," the man said cruelly. Judging from the conversation, his name was Ethan. That kind of insult was too much for Simon to let slide. He could forgive the insolent, groundless hostility, but he couldn't allow anyone to humiliate him. Despite the pain in his bruised collarbone, Simon scooped Ethan up and, without even letting him get dressed, threw him out onto the street. Then the angry man took Ethan's clothes off the hanger and threw them out too. From sudden movements and pain in his collarbone, Simon immediately broke into a sweat. Fortunately, Nancy was there to seat him in a chair in time. That was impressive. Ethan's actually a good man, but too strong-headed and gets jealous too much, the nurse commented as if they were friends. "Come on, that wasn't a big deal. I used to play football in my youth, so I know how to deal with thugs," Simon replied with a smile. At that moment, the little boy of about 5 years old came into the living room. His eyes clearly read fear. "Don't be afraid, Kevin. Ethan has already left," Nancy reassured the boy. Then, having caught Simon's questioning glance, she added, "Kevin is my late cousin's son. She died 5 years ago during childbirth." Her photograph hangs on the wall in the hall. My cousin wasn't married, so the boy could have ended up in the orphanage, but I couldn't let it happen. It's a very sad story." At that moment, Simon felt a surge of inexplicable sympathy for the woman. Now he understood why Ethan was so angry. Being greedy, the man didn't want to raise someone else's child. Simon involuntarily shifted his gaze to the wall in the hall, and to his surprise, saw something that he hadn't noticed when he first got to Nancy's house. The fact was that hanging in the black frame on the wall was a picture of the woman Simon loved more than anything else in the entire world. "Was Lois Brooks your cousin?" Simon asked, pointing to the photo. He was having a very hard time keeping his emotions in check. "Yes, why are you asking? Did you know her?" Nancy asked in surprise. At that moment, tears welled up in Simon's eyes. He couldn't believe that Lois had been dead for 5 years. The worst part was that Simon knew nothing about it, and all this time he'd been thinking that she'd moved on and had gotten married. Having finally recovered from the initial shock, he told Nancy about his past. Simon didn't hide the fact that he was the one to initiate the breakup, and honestly told Nancy that he got jealous of Lois's university friend. But at the time, Simon was too free-spirited and wasn't even thinking about starting a family yet. Lois felt otherwise, and thus the difference in their views ultimately led to their breakup. Then Simon quickly moved to New York in order to break free from his past, and he didn't even know that his girlfriend was already pregnant. Having heard Simon out, Nancy couldn't hold back her tears. All this time, she thought that Kevin's biological father was an awful person who abandoned his family. However, seeing Simon with her own eyes, Nancy realized that this wasn't the case. "Forgive me, Lois. God knows I had no idea about any of it," Simon whispered, touching the picture in the black frame. Meanwhile, Nancy clearly realized that she would now have to face another problem. "What should we do about Kevin? After all, his father is standing just a few feet away from him." The thoughts kept swirling around in the young nurse's head, making it impossible to concentrate and come up with the best solution to their situation. But Simon was a smart man, so he decided not to claim his parental rights. Thus, when the woman sent the boy to play in his room, he said, "I get it, Nancy. You've been raising Kevin all this time. You are his mother, and I wouldn't want to ruin your relationship. All I want to ask for is that you let me see him once in a while. I promise I'll be a great father." Nancy's face brightened up immediately as she smiled sweetly. "Of course, you can visit Kevin anytime and as much as you want. I believe that you're being sincere, and I wouldn't want to stand between you two. And please, don't mind Ethan. He'll be mad at first, but then he'll calm down." Simon chuckled and nodded meekly in agreement. The man knew from experience that after getting humiliated like that, Ethan would never bother Nancy again. In order to alleviate any remaining doubt, Simon and his son had to take a DNA test to prove their kinship. Fortunately, Nancy didn't mind and kindly provided a few hairs from Kevin's comb for the test. They had to wait about 2 weeks for the test results, and when they finally came, Simon's joy knew no bounds. Kevin really was his son. Of course, Simon didn't doubt it for a second, but the DNA test was required as an official confirmation of paternity. Throughout all this time, Simon stayed with Nancy and little Kevin, getting used to the little boy. Without even realizing it, the young people started feeling mutual attraction for each other. Nancy and Simon looked at each other with completely different eyes and realized that their friendship had grown into something bigger. After the memorable fight in the living room, Ethan never came back to Nancy's house. It was rumored that he quickly found himself a new woman, who turned out to be even more accommodating. Meanwhile, Simon, Nancy, and Kevin started living together. Now their home feels safe and is always full of children's laughter. And if someone does have tears in their eyes, those are always tears of joy, because they can't believe they were so lucky to have found each other and become one happy family.